Hello, my name is John Stevenson from the Deep Secure Solutions Center team. Now today we'll be talking about a technology known as Content Threat Removal, or CTR. And this webinar will be recorded and available for viewing later. So if anyone in your organization is interested in this topic, you can share the webinar with that person. And indeed, we'll be sharing the links shortly after this webinar to enable you to do that. So with that in mind, let's take a look at the agenda. Now, first of all, we'll take a look at the threat landscape to see what the risks associated with content threats are and to put them into some sort of context. By way of example, I'm going to take 3 exploits from the last few months and examine the ways in which they differ and look at what they have in common. Then we'll explain what Content Threat Removal, or CTR, is and how it works. I'll explain exactly how it deals with unknown and zero-day threats and precisely what it is that makes it so unique. I'll share with you some use cases where CTR comes into its own, and in doing so I'll refer back to the 3 examples of exploits I highlight in the introduction, showing exactly how CTR defeats these and other highly pernicious threats. Then we'll take a quick look at some of the developments coming downstream in our roadmap. And after that, I'll give you a short live demonstration so you can see how CTR actually works. And we'll wrap up with your questions, some references and links to resources you might be interested in. Now let's start by talking about the threat landscape and what happens if threats aren't removed from content. And I'm going to take 3 real-life examples. The first is ransomware, which is a type of malicious software that blocks access to the victim's data or threatens to publish or delete it unless a ransom is paid. Ransomware exploits are typically carried out using malware that has a payload disguised as a legitimate file. This example one is Locky and was being distributed in email via attachments containing malicious Microsoft Office documents. In fact, the part of that document was malicious was macro, and when the macro was opened, a document opened and the macro enabled, the infection process begins. The second example is something called steganography. Steganography is the practice of hiding information in plain sight within a file, and it's being increasingly used by malicious threat actors. In recent exploits, these threat actors have been using an exploit kit called Sundown to encode a script in the alpha channel of an image. By abusing the channel, which defines pixel transparency, they can deliver their malicious code via rogue ads that look like legitimate ads, with a very slight difference in color. And our third example from the threat landscape is wiper malware. This particular variant is the Shamoon malware that took out 35,000 workstations at the Saudi Arabian Aramco and Rasgas companies. It employs several evasion techniques to avoid both antivirus detection and sandbox execution, and it's spread using weaponized documents such as PDFs. So the important thing here to note is that what each of these examples share in common is that each has used business content, documents, images, PDFs, to perpetrate an unknown zero-day attack that conventional cybersecurity defenses could not prevent, and that each one could have been avoided if only you could find a way to remove the threat and thus eliminate the risk. That's exactly what CTR does. So Given the 40-odd year history of cybersecurity cat and mouse that's seen countless exploits come and go, and the cybersecurity industry flourish, you could be forgiven for asking, why is this threat landscape so hard to deal with? And in one sense, the answer, at least technically, lies with those examples of business content, and specifically in the complexity of the file formats we use to carry business information, and the vulnerabilities in the applications we use to manipulate that content. I'm going to look in a little detail now at both of these. So first, to complexities in file formats, and by way of illustration, here is a breakdown of the structure of the bitmap file format, or BMP. One of the simplest file formats in general business use, and yet you can see various components and lists of conditional and qualifying annotations, and in fact even that this simple file format is highly complex. Now, a file format is just a description of how business information is encoded as data, specifically as a sequence of bytes that may be stored in a file or transmitted across a network. File formats are generally designed to make storing and editing efficient, and that makes them complicated. The structures inside do not relate directly to the information they're carrying. For example, encoding context and metadata. So even a simple document has a complex representation, and that's key. Complexity is key because it enables an attacker to find a way to exploit the situation. The other reason that this is all so difficult is the vulnerabilities in applications themselves. Here, for example, is a list of known vulnerabilities in Microsoft Office applications, and this list is constantly changing. Indeed, the presence of the encoding context and metadata in file formats that I mentioned in the previous slide makes complex applications such as Microsoft Office and Acrobat Reader even more complex, which is why they routinely fail to render documents properly or even crash. Attackers will exploit such malfunctions to cause damage, carefully crafting unusual structures that are mishandled by the software so that it will damage the system or execute some of the attacker's code and data, which in turn will damage the system. In short, complex systems always have behaviors we don't understand, and many of these are likely to be ones we don't want. What attackers do is find some of these odd behaviors and use them to damage your business. Now, solving this problem isn't simple. The last 25 years of cybersecurity demonstrably show that dealing with the problem of complexity as we've just described it is really difficult, which is why Deep Secure created the Content Threat Removal platform. The platform is based on a single core principle called transformation. And to illustrate that principle and the revolutionary approach to unknown and zero-day threats that it has, I'm going to run a short video clip that illustrates the process in action. Remember, as we do this, that this works with the everyday business information, documents, spreadsheets, PDFs and images as they pass across a boundary point. You see, content threat removal doesn't try to detect or isolate. It removes the threat from content. Instead of bringing in the data, we only bring in the business information that it contains. We call this content transformation. Information is extracted from incoming data, leaving behind any malware. The information is then used to build new data to carry it on to the destination. And this method does not rely on distinguishing good and bad. Any threat is removed, not reduced, and the business gets the information it needs. The platform is deployed at a boundary point, and is comprised of a number of components. It supports on-premise, cloud, and hybrid deployments, with the option to include a special high assurance component for those environments where it is essential to provide physical network separation. The platform supports mail, web, and file transfers. The content packs provide the capability to remove threats from Office documents, images, files, and web services and transactional applications such as those based on XML and JSON. For the user, tools are provided to make it easy to securely store, review, and selectively release content. So, taken together with connectors for example, ICAP and SIEM, the platform provides the content threat removal capability for mail and web services, as well as an anti-steganography gateway. This rich toolset enables solutions ranging from removing threats in images in social media through to washing PDFs imported via internet-facing portals. And at the heart of all this is one fundamental approach. We don't try to detect a threat, we remove it by transforming the business content. Now, for those of you who'd like a little more technical depth, the process works like this. Incoming data is decoded to extract the business information. During this process, any encoding context is discarded. By encoding context, we mean irrelevant information such as the order in which content was added to the file. Much of the metadata associated with the file is also discarded. By this we mean things like, for example, the time and date stamp on a photo, and any active code and malware is also discarded. But important metadata, important to the business, is retained. The extracted business information is then encoded again using an intermediate data format, a deep secure data format, and something the attacker has no visibility or influence over. The information in the intermediate data format is then encoded into new data. Note that a fixed encoding context is used, one independent of the original, so an attacker has no influence over the way the data is built. The use of the fixed encoding context means data is always delivered in a normalized form, rendering it threat-free. Only clean data is delivered. Here's the graphical user interface for the platform, and an opportunity to have a look at both the range of protocols and data types. On the left-hand side here, in terms of protocols, here you can get a sense of how the platform can remove the threats from content carried in machine to machine, for example web services or UDP communication, machine to user, for example the use of the deep secure file sharing protocol, or DSFSP for file sharing, and user to user communication, for example SMTP email. Notice also that the platform can carry a number of concurrent channels. Each of these could be responsible for a different protocol set. On the right-hand side, you'll get a sense of the range of data types that are supported. The common Office documents are supported, Word, spreadsheets, PDF, etc., and also a range of image formats. There's support for JSON and XML so that application traffic can be constrained, so that it will only pass the boundary if it conforms to constraints defined in schema files that you specify and upload. Notice also too the options for both input and output data types. The content threat removal platform makes it possible for you to specify that a business document arriving at the boundary in one format must leave it in another. So, as an example, and given that the bitmap or BMP format has a reputation for being rather less than secure, you could specify that all BMPs arriving at the boundary will leave it as JPEGs. Okay. In terms of the key differentiators then, what makes this solution so special is that with the Deep Secure Content Threat Removal platform, we work using a process of transformation to prevent any exploit contained in seemingly valid business communication from entering an organization. The platform enforces a protocol break at the boundary and removes the business information before creating wholly new content from scratch on the other side of that protocol break and sending it forward to its destination. Only the business information passes end-to-end, and the zero-day exploit is automatically discarded. The platform supports a wide range of application-to-application and general business communication across the boundary points, not just email and web. The platform can control both inbound and outbound information flows. And while it does not prevent information being leaked overtly, it does provide an accurate view of the information leaving a system, allowing users to be held accountable for their actions. In combating unknown and zero-day attacks, it does not need to maintain a list of known attacks and attack signatures. It works without needing to interact with the vendor, and there's no need for signature updates to be brought in regularly from the internet, nor is there a need to report behavior back to a central control system for correlation. Using this approach, you don't need to detect the zero-day exploit or isolate it to observe the behavioral characteristics, you just remove it. And crucially, the user experience is not compromised. As we'll see in our demonstration, business documents are created from scratch with the exact same formatting, layout, and stylistic information, just without the threats. So I'm going to move on now and consider some use cases, and in doing so I'm going to refer back to the example exploits from the threat landscape at the beginning of our webinar. So the first use case is email, and here you can see the email cover letter for the Locky ransomware as it arrives at the content threat removal platform. So here's the email and the embedded link to a Microsoft Word document containing the macro that will, if it's enabled, execute the ransomware payload. Now, in this particular situation, the content threat removal platform will enforce a protocol break, extract the business information from the source email and attachments, create brand new email and attachments using only the business information, and as a consequence, any active code is discarded and we nullify the threat of the ransomware. In the case of email, the content threat removal platform can be deployed on-premise, in cloud, or as a hybrid deployment. The message itself and all attachments are then transformed. The business content is extracted along with any relevant metadata, and new email messages and attachments are then created from scratch on the other side of the boundary point before they continue on their journey. So our second use case is an example here of steganography, a typical use case for steganography. And as you can see here, we've a rather picturesque image of somewhere in the Ukraine. And in this instance, steganography is being used to conceal malware in a way that makes it impossible to detect with the naked eye. In fact, in the pixel queue and transparency numbers in the cityscape here in the background. More importantly, in addition to not being discernible to the human eye, it has no discernible signature that would identify it to a conventional detection-based cybersecurity product. Steganography is being increasingly used by criminals to exfiltrate money and valuable information. If you consider how that works, for example, with something like Twitter, you can visualize a situation where a workstation inside the organization is checking a Twitter feed. Specially crafted tweets contain an image in that feed, within which is a web address hidden using steganography in the image. The web address leads to a public site where a tailored exploit has been placed, and this is downloaded and run, allowing the criminals to wreak havoc. With the content threat removal platform, we effectively clean that stream. So the platform intercepts the images, builds new clean content for delivery, leaving any extra hidden information such as the encoded web address of the exploit behind. In doing so, it forces attackers out into the open. As a consequence, it disrupts the command and control network the criminals use. And ultimately, it ensures that any compromised workstations within your organization cannot be used to steal your valuables. Now, the AntiSteganography Gateway is a component of DeepSecure's content threat removal platform that provides the world's first cybersecurity solution that mitigates the risk of attacks that use steganography. Working with your existing gateways and perimeter defenses, it intercepts content like images and builds new clean content for delivery, leaving any extra hidden information behind. It cleans the stream. It removes such exploits in BMP, GIF, PNG, and JPEG formats. Note also that in addition, a separate component is provided for offline forensic investigation. Our final use case is file transfer, and here I'm referring back to the wiper malware we introduced at the beginning of the webinar. This malware actually supported a number of different payloads, and the trigger for the exploit was the presence of active content in a PDF. PDF files are commonly allowed to be imported via, for example, citizen portals or corporate websites that need information from customers and prospects. Now here, as we'll see a little later in our demonstration, the content threat removal platform comes into its own. It will enforce a protocol break, extract the business information from the source file. It will then create a new target file using only the business information. Any active code will be discarded, and thus we will nullify the threat of the malware. So here we have a classic portal or kiosk type deployment, where users from an untrusted source are able to upload PDFs, and the requirement is to ensure that this is not a vector for the ingress of unknown or zero-day threats into the protected network. Deployed like this, the content threat removal platform will transform each inbound PDF. In doing so, it prevents malware from infecting the protected network, and specifically it prevents the threat actor from infecting systems. In short, the process of transformation stops unknown zero-day attacks. So I want to begin summarizing now what makes content threat removal such a powerful and unique tool in the cybersecurity professional's armory. First of all, Note that unlike first-generation cybersecurity technologies, such as antivirus, CTR is not about trying to detect unsafe data. Note also that unlike second-generation cybersecurity technologies, such as sandboxing, CTR is not about trying to detect unsafe behavior. Unlike some content disarm and reconstruction technologies you may have heard of, we don't try to remove active code and rebuild the existing content, as that's an approach which can't stop attackers evading checks. Instead, we remove the threat, discarding the incoming data, including any active code, destroying exploits concealed using steganography, and removing those most pernicious and potentially dangerous new and hidden threats. The platform's minimal attack surface makes it incredibly difficult to attack or evade, and it's these characteristics that set it apart from first and second generation cybersecurity tools. Now, before our demonstration, now I'm going to say a few words about the roadmap for our content threat removal platform. In terms of platform support, you'll see our capability extending to include flexible hybrid deployments for AWS and Azure. Note also that we have a project underway to look at providing PDF washing as an on-demand service in the cloud. We currently have an analysis underway looking at how the platform can accommodate mobile platforms. We're constantly broadening our data type support, with work underway to examine how we handle video files and more structured data types. And to enable integration with other technologies, we're working on content connectors, ICAP, API, and SIEM integration. Okay, at this point, I'd like to show you a short demonstration of content threat removal using a transformation desktop tool. So this desktop tool effectively contains the transformation engine from the platform. And I'm going to give you 3 short scenarios where we can show how documents, files, images are transformed and threats are removed. The first scenario really is an exploration of a question that we are commonly asked, which is from the user community asking, well, won't my files be in some way damaged or changed as a consequence of this transformation? Well, the answer is no. The integrity of the content and formatting is completely preserved. And to illustrate that, I'm now going to open a PDF for a world-famous consumer product. It's the George Foreman grill, the George Foreman fat-reducing health grill, in fact. And this is the instruction and recipe booklet. Here you can see a reasonably complicated PDF. So we've got a photo, we've got some diagrams going on here, and some fairly complicated formatting going on. And we've got embedded pictures with all the recipes. So there's the PDF, and what I'm going to do now is use the Deep Secure Content Threat Removal Platform transformation engine that I have available to me to remove the content threat. Now, when I do this, what you'll see is 2 copies of the PDF. On the left-hand side is the original, and on the right-hand side, what will appear will be the transformed version of that PDF. So we will have extracted all the business information, all the formatting from it, all the important metadata from it, and rendered a new transformed version. You can see, if you look here in the top left corner, the difference in the file sizes, which is as a consequence of us disposing of unnecessary information in the file during the transformation process. What's more important from the user's perspective, however, is that the integrity of the files has been maintained, and the formatting, the images, and the diagrams are all carried across correctly. And if there'd been a threat in that PDF, it would not have been transformed and carried across. So formatting is preserved and the integrity of the content is ensured, and any threat would be removed. Now, this is equally true when we come to images. And of course, because it's the internet, it wouldn't be the internet without a picture of a cute animal being in use. And so here we have a cute dog from the internet. In this case, I'm going to transform the cute dog. Let's assume there was some exploit encoded in it using steganography. So I'm going to encode and ask the desktop tool to remove steganography. And here again, you'll see we have two images. The first on the left is the original, and on the right, the transformed image. Notice again the difference in file size, as we have effectively discarded unnecessary information. So we have removed the threat from the image. Okay, so when a user asks, what about the integrity of my content? The business data, the formatting, the stylistic information, that is faithfully carried across. Okay, now for my second demo, we're going to look at how threats get removed from PDFs. And for this, we've created a PDF file containing some active content. Here it is. If you can see it on my screen, it's called russiandoll.pdf. And it's actually a rather sneaky little number. I'm going to open it up now so you can see it. It's a PDF file, which informs you that it's protected and is intended for authorized recipients only, and that you must click on a button in order to confirm you have the approval to view the content. In fact, when you click on the button, what happens is that you find that sneakily Microsoft Word has been loaded with a grayed out table, which the caption tells you you'll be able to view properly by enabling macros and clicking enable content. And obviously, were you to do that, then a malware payload would execute on the workstation. So that's our Russian doll PDF. In fact, as it stands today, I believe that virus total, I'm just going to see what the live score for virus total, which would compare that compromised PDF against a long list of antivirus tools, will tell you that while 11 of the commercially available antivirus scanners detect that as a malicious file, that's from a total of 56 antivirus tools, many of which deem it to be entirely innocent. And that's how easy it is to get a zero-day exploit into a network that is dependent solely on an antivirus scanner to protect it from business content exploits. So we need to use something rather more rigorous and robust to ensure that russiandoll.pdf doesn't compromise the workstation. I'm using our desktop transformation tool here to show you how the content threat removal platform deals with this document. I'm just going to drag it in, and you will see that the transformation engine has actually created a wholly new file. There it is, called output.pdf. So we have the original and the transformed one. And if we have a look at the two side by side, you will see here is the original russiandoll.pdf. with an active content button in it, which if you followed that link would compromise the workstation. And here is the transform version with that active content removed from the system. So the new PDF contains no active content, no calling of Microsoft Word, no threat, and no risk of compromise. Okay, now in our final demonstration, I'm going to show you the removal of threats concealed in images using steganography. Remember we said that steganography is the art of hiding something in plain sight. And again, because it's the internet and the internet wouldn't be complete without cute animals, we've two pictures of seemingly adorable cats. This is cat 1 and this is cat 2. Look lovely, don't they? And they would appear to be identical, these two pictures, but the sad truth of the matter is that cat 2 contains some valuable data that's being smuggled out of an organization in a way that won't be detected by data loss prevention or DLP products using steganography. Okay, this is cat 2, this one here. So what I'm going to do now is show you what's hidden in cat 2. So we have a little tool here on the desktop that we use to reveal what's hidden using steganography in images. And I'm just going to drag cat 2 onto this tool. And lo and behold, it tells me that somebody's personally identifiable information and credit card information has been concealed, encoded in pixels within the cat 2 picture. Okay, so if we use the transformation capability in the content threat removal platform, we can remove that concealed information from cat 2. Let's do that now. You'll see that we have a new cat picture called output JPEG. Here it is, this one here. When we open it, it looks like the same old adorable cat that we've seen all along. But this time, when I try and look inside and see what's in there, there's no encoded credit card information. That has been removed from the image. So that concludes the demonstration part of our session. And now it's time for me to just check what questions we have. And I have 2 or 3 questions here actually. Okay, Lena, thank you for your question. I have a question about foreign language support. And that's quite interesting. That's actually best illustrated actually by an example. So if we take a look here at a document on how to learn Japanese, this is the I think it's called Basic Japanese Conversation PDF. That's the one. Okay, so if we take a look at this one here and I run a content threat removal transformation on that, it's quite a large document, so just bear with me for a moment. You should see that the original document is there on the left, and that we are going to see a transformed version on the right, which has honored the Japanese language script, or kanji, as I assume it is, and carried that across. Notice, by the way, that again, all the formatting of business information has been retained and honored. And we could have done this with Arabic just as equally as we could have done it with Japanese. So, Elena, to your question about foreign languages, yes, the transformation engine is able to handle foreign language character sets. Okay, I've had another question from Harvey. Harvey says, can I get rid of my antivirus gateway? Question mark. Well, from a technical purist perspective, we would say yes, you can. However, there may be obviously commercial reasons why you might not want to, and we will happily work with and around existing investments in cybersecurity and with existing investments in your antivirus gateway. The big difference is that we'll remove the threat, and specifically the unknown threats and the zero-day threats, and that's something that the AV gateway can't do. So if you wish to, yes. However, we will also work with the gateway. Okay, and I have another question now. This is from Richard on signed. Yeah, okay. Signed and encrypted emails. A good question. And the slightly more involved answer. So, with encrypted content, we would always recommend that encrypted content is never allowed to pass uninspected across the boundary point. There are therefore a couple of ways of dealing with that. We can either hold it so that it can be checked in some way in a secure area via some kind of secure browse down capability. Alternatively, we can make use of some of the other technologies we have in our locker to effectively decrypt it, check it, and then re-encrypt it afterwards. So there's more than one way of dealing with the safe passage of encrypted content. And with signed content, it's a little more interesting still. Obviously, a signature is proof that something hasn't been tampered with. If I transform an email and create a new one, I therefore effectively invalidate that signature in its purest sense. So here again, using some other technologies we have in our portfolio, we can provide, if it's required, the option to check the message and then to re-sign it after the content has been removed, threat has been removed from it. So Richard, that's signed and encrypted stuff. I've also got a question here from Simon. Which I can't fully read for some reason at the moment. See if we can maximize the screen to get that question a little clearer. I can't pick that question out right now, Simon, so if it's okay to you, I'm going to come back to you offline on that one. My apologies, the screen rendering isn't quite picking it up. Okay. So that concludes this webinar on content threat removal. And as mentioned at the outset, the webinar will be recorded and available for viewing later. So if you have other people in your organization who are interested, you can share this webinar with them, and we'll issue the links for that shortly. It only remains for me to say thank you very much and goodbye.